Imagine a day where children are guided and nurtured in a way that honors their unique humanness. A day where, instead of being expected to change in order to fit in, children can be met right where they're at. Welcome to Where They're Planted, a podcast for parents and care providers of unique children. Caring for a child with a developmental, emotional, or behavior challenge, a neurodiverse brain, or difficult early life experiences can be confusing and exhausting. On this podcast, we'll help your child flourish and strengthen their roots by helping you not only understand them, but also gain the skills to help them bloom where they're planted. We'll use brain science, nervous system tools, collaborative strategy sessions, and a deep understanding of the developmental process to create a fertile environment around your child in order to nurture their growth. I am your host, Jen Bluske, an occupational therapist with over 25 years of experience and a parent coach. My most closely held title, however, is that of a single mom of 2 thriving adopted kids, so I have walked this walk. I am truly excited to share, teach, and dive into these important topics on each episode. Welcome back to Where They're Planted. I'm your host, Jen Bluske, and today I'm joined by someone who has dedicated his career to understanding the inner lives of gifted, twice exceptional, and highly sensitive people. My guest is Mark Talaga. Mark has been counseling gifted individuals for over 12 years and is the owner and director of the Center for Identity Potential, a mental health counseling practice that specializes in working with gifted, asynchronous, and neurodivergent individuals. Mark is highly respected in the field of gifted counseling and has published numerous articles on topics related to giftedness and counseling. He is also a sought-after speaker and consultant and has provided training and consultation services to schools, universities, and mental health organizations throughout the United States. This conversation today was just such a gift, no pun intended, around talking about these challenges that gifted and asynchronous development can create for individuals, and really talking about identity and how we shape our identity by both our strengths and our struggles, and what it looks like to truly support somebody growing where they're planted. And so I'm just really excited to share this conversation with you today. All right. Welcome, Mark.
Oh, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Happy to have this conversation. So can you start by just sharing a little bit about your story? What drew you to this work with gifted kids?
Yeah, well, to say that my way to gifted was roundabout is probably putting it lightly. I myself, growing up as a gifted person, not really identified, but, school was easy and I just kind of got through things no problem. I had a million different things that I wanted to do in life. I thought I was going to go into music business, which is what I went to college for. And then I didn't like that. And so I was like, well, I like video games. I'll become a video game guy. And so I got my degree and worked for a few video game companies over the years. And then ultimately, my own challenges with executive functioning and other issues led me to getting fired. And I was at this crossroads where I felt pretty lost. And I said, I've always liked helping people. Maybe I'll go into counseling psychology. And so I went and I got my master's, and I was trying to find a practicum site, like a clinical internship site, and nobody would hire me because I had zero psych background. Until I met Andy Mahoney, who at the time ran the Center for Identity Potential. And he's like, I kind of like your story. You're an interesting guy. Let's teach you about the world of gifted. And so I kind of fell into it. But the more I did the work, the more I was like, oh, that's me. Oh, nope, that's me too. Oh, yep, that's the challenges I have. And I realized slowly but surely, like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be and helping people. And so over the years, I've gained a lot of expertise in the area of gifted, asynchronous, neurodivergent folks. And here I am today.
Awesome. I love your story. I love how you fell into it, so to speak.
Yeah.
So tell me just a little bit about the Center for Identity Potential and what you guys do there.
Sure. So we are a private practice mental health clinic. We specialize in working with, like I said, gifted, asynchronous, neurodivergent individuals from the whole age range, from probably as young as 6 or 7, all the way through adulthood. And the reason we have the name, the Center for Identity Potential, is because the belief is that when you're working with people that are very outside of the norm, the idea is you want to create identities that fit who you really are. In those identities, you really have to go through a complex model of understanding of all the different systems in the world that play against your own uniqueness and what you're trying to create. But when you create identities that fit who you are and allow you to express the real you, you start to feel better. You start to become healthy. We say it activates potential. We don't believe in reaching potential.
Right.
And when you're living in a fit that isn't you, all of a sudden that can activate a lot of, negative things in your life, mental health issues, physical illness, whatever it could be. And so our job is to really take a systems approach to helping very unique individuals understand what they're up against, to understand their own vulnerabilities and their strengths so that they can create something that is a fit.
Wow. I really love how you describe creating a fit and just really seeing people kind of exactly, where they are, which is the point of this podcast. So, I have a lot of parents who listen to this podcast, and the idea of giftedness rolls around a lot in my work. And so let's give it a context. Like, what does giftedness mean, right? Is this just high IQ? How do you define?
Right. So my definition and our definition here at the Practice of Gifted is a little different, because the idea is we don't believe it's a number or a test score or something where you're excelling, in life, and that means you're gifted and life's going to be easy for you. It's really kind of the opposite. It's more like giftedness is when some part of your development, whether that, yes, is your, vocabulary, math skills, artistic ability, gross and fine motor skills, when some part of that development is way outside of the norm, way above average in some area of your life, to us, that would be giftedness. It is more of you are not in, the average and the norm. And so because of that, we would consider that gifted. The founder of our company always likes to say that there was a kid that worked on a farm that he lived by that was like 9 years old and can operate a backhoe better than, any adult could ever do it. And he goes, that is giftedness, but nobody celebrates that. Nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about how that is so out of the norm that we should identify that as giftedness. And so there's the idea of, well, isn't everybody gifted? I mean, to some degree. What I would look at it as is everybody has a developmental profile that has areas that are ahead and behind or right in the average. But the farther out you are ahead, the more likely you are to have other areas that are maybe not as close to that in the average or even delayed. And when you have really extreme profiles like that, that is when you usually start to work with somebody like us or yourself, because there's all these gaps and holes in what a person is and isn't doing that needs to be addressed and understood.
Yeah, we see that all the time in our practice, where there's just this unevenness to development, and trying to sort of help parents see the unevenness for what it is, but also support it and honor it. And in that, I know in our area, the term 2E pops up. So I know that that's a word, at least in our area, that's used a lot. Let's have that conversation, like what that means and kind of what your thoughts are on 2E.
2E is a helpful word in a sense. It's just descriptive. It kind of gives you a sense of here's a very bright person who's struggling. But the reality is, when you're dealing with very complicated kids or adults, it's not so much 2E, it's more like 10E. Yeah. There's so many different areas of underdevelopment or overdevelopment that you have to really assess for and understand. And the people out there that try to say gifted is separate from 2E, I don't really buy it, because if you really look at profiles, everybody has that scatter where, one area and their receptive language is way off the charts, but their expressive language is low, or their math and computational is really high, but their operational math is low. There's all these different gaps that need to be looked at. And so 2E is a little, I get the purpose of it, but it's a little reductive when you're really looking at a very complicated individual.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that in my practice where we have kids who come in able to, we had a kid once who was, it was a special interest and it was brilliant. This child knew everything about toilets and could literally create one out of, anything. And, just had this, engineering mind that was just phenomenal. And then you see the challenges sometimes, in our work, what we see a lot is motor planning. Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
There's the ability to like make a plan, or the ability to understand what's happening inside your body, or something to that extent. And really like how you described like Tenny. It's like it's all over the place, and we really have to understand each different area of development to help the individual understand it.
Oh, absolutely. We deal a lot with the idea of potential in our world and your world, I'm sure as well, where the idea is, a lot of these kids that really struggle with some area in their life, but it bothers them on some level. It's like they don't like that they can't do X, Y, and Z, even though it feels like they should or their peers are or whatever. We always identify that as raw potential. If it bothers you on some level that you're not able to move forward in trying to do something, typically you have the potential to do it, and somewhere inside, deep down, you know it, but you don't have a framework, or you don't have the skills developed, or you haven't had it taught to you in the way where it makes sense to you and you can apply it into your life. We try to look at all those things of, yes, they have vulnerabilities in planning and executive functioning and all this, but we don't ever dismiss that they can't ever learn it. Now, like even me, like my executive functioning on a good day is probably still a C+, but I've learned to accept that part of myself. I've gotten a lot better, and I get a lot of help because that's what I really need in order to make a better fit for me. So I'm not stressing out too much about the things that I really struggle with.
Wow, that's just such a great way of looking at it. And in our work, the theme of the podcast, Where They're Planted, is really supporting kids, just kind of where they are. How do you see environment, right? Relationships, homeschool, community shaping or supporting the shaping of identity for our gifted kids or for adults that you work with?
Boy, yeah. That's a big one.
Right, it's a big question. It's like one that, sits at the top of my head often.
I love it, though. That's exactly what you should be asking, because you want to look at each and every system, whether that's their physical environment or their school setting or their family dynamics or their social environment, even their religious upbringing. All of it matters because on some level, as you're building an identity, whether that's as a gifted student or, a professional race car driver, whatever it is, each and every system has a tendency to either validate and say, yes, that's who you are, or that is something you do, or invalidate, where they say, well, I don't know, because you can't do this. I don't really think you're going to be able to make it in, this field in life, or, because you can't, spell your name yet, but you can do advanced physics. Maybe AP classes aren't for you. And there's this tendency from outside sources to, yes, validate or invalidate, to affirm and help work with it and challenge it and grow it or not, and how you affiliate within those different places. So, it absolutely matters, not to the point where it should prevent you from creating whatever you need to create in life, but to the point where you have to be aware. Yeah, you know what? I want to be, a muralist. I want to paint big murals, and my family's all lawyers and doctors. Yeah. And even though they say I could do whatever I want with my life, there's always this tendency of they're worried about money and am I going to be okay? And maybe I should have a backup plan, and maybe you shouldn't do this. And you have to be able to tease that out within yourself of, it's okay for my parents to be worried for me because they love me, but I also know that this is what I want to be doing with my life. And also, do I know how to get there? And do I know what I would need to make that happen? And the more clear you get within all your systems of what's working for you and against you, the better chance you have of creating solutions, moving forward, and being able to brave whatever comes your way.
And in that, I'm thinking about parents who might be listening who have younger kids under the age of 7, 8, where, I feel like, there's still a lot of identity and a lot of choice that age has, and parents are still doing a lot for their kids at that age. For parents who are listening, well, the first part of this question is, what are some of the signs that they might have a child, with this 10E, this giftedness with some unevenness in development? And then 2, how do we support our parents when kids are still really young to create some systems around their kids?
Very good question. First, the idea of how do I know that I have a 10E or a very complicated kid? My joke answer is, are you popping open a bottle of wine every single night after you get your kids down? Yeah, you probably got one.
Yep.
Right.
It's our unique kids. Yeah.
It's the intensity that you can pay attention to. It's not their abilities or their achievements, or are they at the top of their class? You have a kid that has a lot of intensities, or basically you're using a lot of approaches with that child that maybe you got from a more normative lens that just don't seem to work. Your kid's outsmarting you, they're manipulated, they don't mean to be doing it on purpose,
No.
but these are the kind of kids that I'd say, yeah, you probably got some, giftedness, asynchrony, neurodivergence, whatever you want to call it. But that level of intensity, or you're just feeling like, I don't know what to do with this little guy or girl, you're probably got it. But again, to me, it's like whether they qualify as gifted or not doesn't matter. If you're dealing with some level of complexity, that's when you got to really think outside the box. Our belief here at the center is that if you're really kind of hitting your head up against the wall, you don't know what to do, every day is a challenge, every day is a struggle, nothing you've tried has worked, yeah, you probably need some support. You find somebody like you, or you find somebody like our center to be a guide that really understands these kids that are way outside of the norm. And then, ideally you have some level of assessment done. What are we dealing with? Where are these big tantrums coming from? Where is the struggle at? Where's the frustration at for both child and parent? And ultimately, if you can find a sense of what's going on with these kids, then you can start to build a team of people through either your school, or whether it's homeschool or a co-op, or, with, somebody like you or me that is helping guide, okay, this kid has specific needs, right? I like to always say that gifted education is really special education, right? We have special education on one side of the bell curve that is very tailored. You have to go to a lot of schooling to be able to even work with these, kids and adults. And it's the other way around, except we don't have the training. We don't have anybody teaching you that stuff. And so everybody's kind of fumbling around in the dark. And it's more where you can find somebody that really understands this stuff, that can put it very plainly and clearly that here's what this kid really needs, or, helping the parents understand this is what a bedtime routine would look like for your child. And how do we manage expectations, and how do we know that a lot of the issues that we're facing are developmental in nature and they're not going to be there forever. But we also want to be aware of what we're up against.
And I think that for so many parents I work with and my parent work that I do, it's this idea of letting go of the quote unquote typical way of doing things and imagining a structure or a support around our kids in order to allow them to truly be themselves and develop those skills. And so I guess that's my question is, how do you see the juxtaposition of developing, right? You said, when there's that tension point that the potential is probably there, and fully honoring, right? I run against that all the time, especially with my kids with neurodivergence. I want to truly honor and see and accept just as they are and really revel in that. And I really want to, when that tension point's there, I want to push that skill.
Right.
Where is that? How do you see that dynamic for parents?
Well, that is the challenge. That's the work right there, because you ultimately have to know whatever the reaction is. So let's say it's, I can't get my kid out the door in the morning, right? Just some simple example.
Common one.
That.
Yep.
Right. And it's fighting, it's anger, it's yelling, it's reminding, it's, I'll do it later, it's all this kind of stuff. So first and foremost, okay, whoa, you got a lot going on. So yes, we have to let go that we're not going to just, have this be perfect. But we have to look at it from a skill-based, okay, is this child struggling with the transition of it? Are they struggling with, their ability to sequence through their day? They're already anticipating the stress going on in 6th hour, or, their end of the day right then and there. Do they actually have the skill to brush their teeth, get themselves dressed, put their shoes on? And they might be older, and the answer can still be no, that they don't have it. And so we have to let go of some expectations of what they should be able to do. And the other thing you have to be able to let go is this idea that they can do it all the time, meaning parents say, well, I've seen him do it before, why can't he do it again? Well, he probably can do it from time to time, but there's no consistency. And so sustaining a skill or a habit is still executive functioning, is still your prefrontal cortex, which is underdeveloped in a lot of these really intense kids. And so it's saying, okay, I might need to be the one that has their shoes laid out for them. I might need to be the one that has this order, or there is a physical checklist or whatever. Every kid's different, right?
Yep.
I like to give the example of my own kid my son, who is just like, he is just a bundle of springs and rubber, and he's bouncing this way and that. And my wife actually does a better job of this than I do. She's like, he has to go and run right now. He's got to just be outside. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, I don't want to go. It's cold, whatever. But there's a reality that if I'm really honoring who this guy is, he does need it. And so there are times when, if you drive by our front yard, you will see our kid running laps like a dog with us playing music out in front of him, because that's just what he needs to regulate.
Yes.
But at the same time, what we're trying to teach him is to become aware of his need for regulation. Right? That's a skill.
Yep. You're speaking my language.
Yeah, right. Are you aware that you have a little extra energy? And sometimes we need to give a little prompt. So we've got to be careful on what skill we're trying to teach at any given time, right? Are we trying to teach the end result skill where they're just chill and calm? That might be jumping the gun. Or are we trying to teach them awareness of what the issue really is? Are you aware that you struggle with transitions in the morning? Are you aware that when I ask you and you're not owning the responsibility that you've said yes, and you didn't process what I said, or you didn't process what you said, that's creating the tension between us? And then the other piece is probably strike when the iron's cold. Don't do it in the morning. You know what I mean? Yep. Don't do it while it's happening. But maybe it's this reflection of, okay, I'm starting to get a little clarity on what we need to deal with, and when can we do it where we're talking about it when it's not so tense.
It's not such a big, we're not in the moment. I want to shift and just ask, again, I know a lot of the families I work with who probably are really resonating with this conversation might be a few steps down the road of really struggling with some more significant, I'm going to call it mental health stuff at this point.
Oh, yeah.
With their kids, some really strong resistance, some really unsuccessful times. And as you're labeling it, a really lacking of identity, like, right? I can't do anything right anyway. Nobody gets me. Why do I try?
Right.
So, I can see that if we can really support kids from the foundation up, we're going to really have some kids who are really empowered. And for families who are listening, and maybe we're not there, where do we start?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that came into my mind is the idea of, it takes a village, and today's kind of modern society, we've lost a lot of that. It used to be, we were connected by communities of neighbors and family, and people were closer together. And so the burden was shared. And a lot of times it just falls on the parents. And that can be stressful, because you could do everything right as mom and dad or whatever, and it still won't kind of click for that kid, because you need other people basically saying the same thing from many different sources. So, parents will get frustrated when I say something to the child and they're like, wow, that really makes sense. And the parent's like, I said that 100 times.
Yep.
And I say, I know, but I'm not mom and dad. And so it's going to come in a little differently. But, it doesn't have to come from a professional. Sometimes it's, somebody at your church, and like I said, a neighbor, a family friend. But sometimes it is a child hearing that they're struggling from not just mom and dad. So the long story short is, if you're really feeling alone and you're really feeling like you're up against it and nothing you're doing is working, then it is probably time to say, where could I find some help? And not just help for the kid. I think a lot of people come into our practice saying, okay, here's my kid, fix him and send him back to me. And we're very clear from the beginning, no, this is a family. This is everybody. We're all in this together, because we all have blind spots. We are all struggling. We all need to learn how to become experts on what's happening and how to best support it. And it's okay to get that help for yourself alongside what's going on with your kid. And ideally, if that kid knows that you're struggling just as much as they are, and they're not the only one that's a screw up, quote unquote, there's a little bit of more flexibility for them to maybe say, okay, this is maybe bigger than all of us, because that's the hardest part, is saying, you know what, this is bigger than us. This is more complicated than we can handle right now. It's outside of our scope. And so where do we go to find help and support and a guide that can really understand this?
That's lovely. That's lovely. Creating some community for families is so important, and really looking at it from a family systems perspective is just everything. Is
Yeah.
just everything. What are you currently curious about in your field in this, combination of neurodivergence, giftedness, mental health? Like, where's your brain percolating? Where are you interested in learning, or where are you seeing it going?
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's a good question. So the more I do this work, the more I become aware of how little psychology has to play. And that might be, heretical given the nature of what I do. What I mean by that, though, is I'm learning so much about, health conditions, primitive motor reflexes, OT work, and, all these different physical, biological things that tend to help regulate and give people what they need, from diet and exercise. So the more I'm doing this, the more I'm looking at, wow, a lot of the anger from kids, a lot of the shutdown from kids, a lot of the struggling might be more physiological than psychological.
Yeah.
And so I'm not too big into the psychobabble world. I'm more like, where's your thyroid levels at, than I am to ask, what's your relationship like with your mother? Although I do care about that. But, the idea is, I do see it moving more and more as we learn more and more about the brain and the body and the mind-body connection. That is probably a stronger route of how we help people long-term.
That's lovely. Yeah, that brain-body connection, right? As an OT by training, watching the two fields and then the physiological pieces come together has been right at the top of my list as well, of like, there's another frontier here that we are just at the beginning of
100%.
With our support in what we do. And then, if there's a thing that you could tell parents, one thing that they could try, think about, honor as they roll this conversation around, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing that I like to explain to parents that sometimes solves a little bit of the cognitive dissonance they have in raising very complicated kids is, for the gifted, the simple is complex and the complex is simple. And so you can have a kid that can build an entire universe in Minecraft, but that cannot for the life of them turn in their homework.
Yes.
And that simple task for them on some level is more complex than we realize. And so we don't judge a person by the height of what they're able to do as some sort of litmus test for what they should be able to do everywhere else. It is both. The simple is complex and the complex is simple.
That's a lovely tagline to really think about as we're supporting our kids. Yeah. Mark, how can people find you?
If you're interested in the practice, you can find us at the Center for IdentityPotential.com. And we are located in Michigan and Chicago, but we see clients from all over through Zoom and other areas. If you are interested in my podcast, I host the Hopelessly Gifted podcast and talks a lot about, some of the cool things we talked about today and in some more depth and detail. And you can listen to that on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or you can visit our website at hopelesslygifted.com.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'll drop all of that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much. It was such a fun conversation.
Oh, thank you, Jen. This was great. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Where They're Planted is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Jen Bluske. Music is by Gaston Reen and Pod 5. Thank you for loving your child right where they're planted.